Part 2. Now that we established it was clearly Jones who could have leaked that information, let's continue. So Byline Times can reveal how the story, so-called Megxit, was published on the same day the Sussexes were planning their own announcement. It prompted a constitutional crisis and wrongfully claimed that Prince Harry had blindsided his 93-year-old grandmother, provoking a widespread public backlash when in fact, according to Spare, the Queen had been aware of it since January the 3rd. The article also goes on to talk about a part where Harry revealed how a further meeting that was set up with the Queen was blocked by palace staff and how she had already previously signed off on a plan for Harry and Meghan to move to South Africa.
We talked about South Africa. Half the year in Cape Town, maybe. That could work. Away from the drama, but closer to my conservation work, and to 18 other Commonwealth countries. I'd run the idea by Granny once before. She'd even signed off on it. And I'd run it by Paul at Karen's house, the WASP present. He told me to put it in writing, which I'd done immediately.
Now, in the book Spare, after the first letter was leaked, Harry was a little hesitant to write a second letter. And then, of course, in that second letter, he did mention relinquishing those titles, and that's when Prince Charles didn't respond, and he wanted to have a sit-down meeting. And then that's when Harry let him know, okay, well, that's great, because we and Meg are already going to come out and visit Granny in the first place. Now, he already had that meeting set up with Queen Elizabeth, but all of a sudden, that meeting couldn't happen, and he was blocked from seeing his Granny.
We're coming back to Britain, I said. We'd love to see you. I told her explicitly that we hoped to discuss with her our plan to create a different working arrangement. She wasn't pleased. Neither was she shocked. She knew how unhappy we were. She'd seen this day on the horizon. One good chat with my grandmother, I felt, would bring this ordeal to an end. I said, Granny, are you free? Yes, of course. I'm free all week. The diary is clear. That's great. Meg and I can come up for tea and then drive back to London. We have an engagement at Canada House the next day. You'll be exhausted from the travel, she said. Do you want to stay here? By here, she meant Sandringham. Yes, that would be easier, and I told her so. That would be lovely, thank you. Are you planning to see your father too? I asked, but he said it's impossible. He's in Scotland and can't leave until the end of the month. She made a little sound, a sigh or a knowing grunt. I had to laugh. She said, I have only one thing to say about that. Yes? Your father always does what he wants to do. Days later, January the 5th, as Meg and I boarded a flight in Vancouver, I got a frantic note from our staff, who'd received a frantic note from the Bee. Granny wouldn't be able to see me. Initially, Her Majesty thought this would be possible. It will not. The Duke of Sussex cannot come to Norfolk tomorrow. Her Majesty will be able to arrange another meeting this month. No announcements about anything shall be issued until such a meeting takes place. I said to Meg, they're blocking me from seeing my own grandmother. When we landed, I considered driving straight to Sandringham anyway. To hell with the Bee. Who was he to try to block me? I imagined our car being stopped at the gate by palace police. I imagined smashing past security, the gates snapping across the bonnet. Diverting fantasy. And a fun way to spend the trip from the airport. But no, I'd have to bide my time. When we reached Frogmore, I rang Granny again. I imagined the phone ringing on her desk. I could actually hear it in my mind. Bring! Like the red phone in the VHR tent. Troops in contact. Then I heard her voice. Hello? Hi, Granny. It's Harry. Sorry, I must have misunderstood you the other day when you said you didn't have anything going on today. Something came up that I wasn't aware of, she said. Her voice was strange. Can I pop in tomorrow then, Granny? Well, I'm busy all week. At least she added. That was what the Bee told her. Is he in the room with you, Granny? No answer.
According to two well-placed sources, Prince Charles' private secretary, Sir Clive Alderton, the WASP, and Lord Chamberlain, Lord Peel, who was a close friend of Prince Charles, strongly urged Prince Harry to have Jones' names stripped from the record. The article goes on to say that it was followed by an internal inquiry conducted by Simon Case, aka The Fly, who at the time was the private secretary to Will and Kate and a close colleague of Jones, who conducted that, having heard him deny any allegation that he leaked confidential information. There was no case to answer. Okay. However, Byline Times learned that Jones and his partner had already named specifically an anonymous but highly detailed whistleblower testimony, which included an internal News UK ZC contributor accounting code purportedly from the administrator within the Sun, which was deemed credible enough to warrant a referral to the Metropolitan Police and which was integral to the legal letter in which Prince Harry sent to the Sun. Because no one wanted this to end up in court, this would drag the hidden dealings between the palace and the press into the public and would be deemed highly undesirable by the offices of Prince Charles and Prince William. Now, according to the source, Harry and Meghan, they were expendable, but of course the heirs and the wives were not. But Harry wasn't having it, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. And Harry wasn't having it. He wanted to know how their private information kept getting spun into negative headlines in the biggest newspapers at that. And he and Meghan had been stung very badly by the timing and manner of Wootton's reporting on their plans to live part of the year abroad, which wasn't even a new idea as the Queen had previously given her blessing for the move to South Africa, which of course didn't work out because it was leaked. Not to mention the detailed intelligence which come up suggesting that Wootton had been paying the partner of a Kensington Palace official who had a lot of access for these stories about the family, and Harry seemed pretty determined to get to the bottom of it. The source goes on to state, a view as quickly as taken within the royal households that everything needed to be brought under control. The removal of the transition funding, which Prince Charles knew was his son's only lifeline to keep him safe, was considered a very effective way of trying to bring Harry and Meghan back into the UK, but of course that didn't work. The rest goes on to talk about how they're pretty competitive and how they use the press, which we all pretty much know that. So if y'all want, y'all can pause to read that. But it was this quote that actually stuck out to me. Because it's well known that the royal family is known to communicate through the press and they're very competitive amongst each other, this is why it was such a problem when Christian Jones was named in those legal letters. Because whether it was true or not, that information Jones collected through the course of his work was ending up in the Sun. And that technically was not the point, but the point is that the royal family is doing deals in trades with the press for all-time favorable coverage and protection to maintain public relevance. And of course, naming Christian Jones threatened to shine a light on that to the entire unethical relationship that they have between the institution and the press. So of course, Harry had to be punished. Now here is where the shift changes, because it's well known by sources close to Dan that he did not have favorable words behind closed doors about Harry's brother. The source goes on to say that Dan really didn't have any interest in royal stories until about 2018, and then of course we all know about that infamous article that he wrote for The Sun in March of 2019, letting it be known that Kate and Rose was beefing. Now here's the part I find interesting, is where a former friend of Dan Wootton told Byline Times that the journalist's allegiance apparently quickly shifted from one prince to another. Dan hated Prince William until around May of 2019, then said behind closed he didn't have a good word to say about him. He was always talking about his attitude, but Dan never really criticized Harry. Really, he never seemed to have that much interest at all. Then suddenly in the summer of 2019, he switched. Basically, he was hating Harry and Meghan. He had previously been obsessed with Prince William, and then he switched to the Sussexes.
A sad little man, the newspaper's showbiz editor, was said to be the lead reporter on the story. Why him? Why, of all people, the showbiz guy? Because lately, he'd refashioned himself into some sort of quasi-royal correspondent, largely on the strength of his secret relationship with one particularly close friend of Willie's comms secretary, who fed him trivial and mostly fake gossip. He was sure to get everything wrong, as he'd got everything wrong on his last big exclusive, Tiara Gate. He was equally sure to cram his story into the paper as fast as possible, because he was likely working in concert with the palace, whose courtiers were determined to get ahead of us and spin the story. We didn't want that.
Okay, I'm running out of time, so we will continue on to part 3 with In Plain Sight, which is the photo the palace slipped up, or should I say Simon Case, aka the Fly, slipped up in his investigation because he forgot about this photo, which basically let us know that Jones and Dan were in fact friends. Make sure you like for part 3.